Developing news tonight, the Nueces County Sheriff's Office continuing to battle the outbreak of coronavirus cases. There, the patients include 8 inmates at the main jail considered to be high risk when it comes to their health. And those inmates have been isolated. The sheriff says medical staff at the jail have been successful in treating them. He says so far none have required hospitalization. Yesterday we told you about the increase in positive cases at the sheriff's office and that the total number of employees who've tested positive is at least 50 right now. The sheriff says the jail, though, is his main concern. He says he's having to reassign employees from other departments to fill in as correctional officers.
We've pulled patrol deputies, we've pulled warrant deputies, we've pulled detectives into the jail because this jail is our primary concern. This jail is the biggest responsibility of the sheriff and the Nueces County Sheriff's Office, and we will continue to keep it safe for the inmates.
Sheriff Hooper saying the standards require at least 1 correctional officer for every 48 inmates. And right now the sheriff's office has just over 900 inmates in their system.